Good afternoon and welcome to the Video Surveillance Protecting People, Protecting Assets webinar. Before we begin, just a few quick housekeeping matters. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available for you to rewatch and/or to share with others. So be on the lookout for the link to that following the conclusion of today's event. As a reminder, we advise you to mute your telephone line and submit all your questions and comments into the question box. That box should be located toward the right side of your screen. You may need to expand it out to access it. We will do our best to answer as many questions as possible. Lastly, be on the lookout for poll questions throughout today's presentation. These polls can be accessed once they're active directly on your screen. With that, I'm pleased to introduce Christopher Reeves and JB Smith with today's presentation. Chris?
Thank you, Brian. Hey, we'd like to welcome everyone. I'm Chris Reeves. I'm with Resolute Partners. I'm a regional manager there. Resolute's video security integrator, among other things. Not to talk too much about myself, I have about 6 years experience in video security and just over 20 years in the Army, retired as a communicator. And I'm pleased to have JB Smith with HII Group here with us today as well. As you can see, he brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to the table. Our contact information is shown here. It will also be listed on the last slide of this deck in case you need additional time to copy that down. So we have quite a lot of slides to get through today. We'll move fairly quickly and pause when there's questions. If we have some time at the end, we'll take some additional ones. Most of the housekeeping items have already been addressed. Today we're just looking at trying to understand what makes up a video system, give you a very brief exposure to the latest technology and how people are currently using this to protect their investment. This is not meant to make you an expert. We just simply don't have enough time for that. But we'll scratch the surface, hopefully pique your interest, and answer any questions that we have. I think if we have enough interest in a particular topic, we can have a follow-up webinar addressing those. So, jumping into the first poll question.
Do you have video surveillance systems installed today? And hopefully we can get everyone to chime in.
Give everyone just a second to answer. That'll just give us a gauge on if you have systems or not, and kind of where you're at on that scale.
All right, Chris, we've closed the poll. It appears that we got about 82% of the attendees today state that they have some form of a video surveillance system installed. I've got about 3% that do not, and got a 15, 16% that state that they don't currently have one, but they're thinking about installing. So we do have a few people that are going in that direction.
Okay, outstanding. So it sounds like most of our audience already has some exposure to video. Maybe you've had it for some time, and you may be aware of some of the pitfalls and some of the advantages. So we'll hit on those as we go through this. So one of our points that we want to bring away today is the old way of doing things and kind of the new way the video surveillance industry is kind of going. The old way, you had a camera up there, it records on motion. If something happens, you go back and watch maybe hours of video trying to see, if you got good video of it, if you caught that incident. New way, we're really trying to leverage technology and use these, we'll call them smart cameras. They have analytics and some artificial intelligence in them. And we're going to use those analytics to create alerts, create markers within the data that you can search against, and really speed up your ability, and it's really just a force multiplier for you to either find video and be alerted of how things are happening. By doing that, what we're trying to do is we're actually trying to stop crime, incidents, behavior from happening instead of watching it after the fact. We're trying to keep you informed, both on the ground or at a management level. And we're trying to alert the right people at the right time, whenever that time is appropriate. There's some incidents that may happen that you need to be instantly notified of. And so there's some ways in today's environment that you can do that. So today's asset management. I'm sorry, go ahead, JB. I interrupted you.
Yeah, I'll do this one. Today's asset managers are more proactive than ever, and risk management requires it. For those who have organizations out here who follow a risk management protocol and a risk management structure, incorporating this type of technology into taking care of your organization is important. Owners are demanding that their properties and their assets are being looked after in their absence. So more and more organizations are actually making sure that this type of technology is in place to be proactive in protecting those assets. And of course, local first responders, they truly do appreciate having that access to video, even from police departments, emergency departments, firefighters, to be able to see the onset of certain incidents. So they're definitely looking to have this access to this information. And when you really speak to risk management, one of the things about risk management, you want to identify that hazard. You definitely want to analyze and assess what the risks are. You want to come up with a plan and control that particular risk. And once you get to that portion of controlling, you want to make sure it stays controlled. So you're going to review what you have in place. And a lot of times the video technology is perfect to give you the intelligence and analytics that you can use to determine how you will address future issues of the same nature, maybe at a different location.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I would imagine most of the organizations, you're already familiar with those steps of the risk management cycle. You're probably, maybe formal or informally, you've already been doing some of those things, whether it be trip and fall hazards there in your community, in the parking lot, common areas, things like that. But we also incorporate that looking at it from a security standpoint and physical security standpoint. So this is just a very brief example. A lot of your security integrators can do this kind of assessment for you. Of course, you can hire an independent security consultant to give you a formal report. But what I really want you to take away is it's just not a cookie cutter box solution when it comes to today's video. You really analytically look at the problems and behaviors that you have on a property, and how are you going to address that using those 4 steps. Really brief examples here. We have an apartment complex that has 1 entrance, several parking lots. They have a problem with unauthorized vehicles, maybe a lot of people in the parking lot after hours, some vandalism, dumping, foot traffic from next doors, really kind of their list of complaints. Those may sound familiar to you. They're fairly common in multifamily residences. So whatever it is, we take that and we're going to try to leverage technology against that. And we're going to look to see how we do that. For example, we may have a mix here, unauthorized vehicles. Upon the assessment, I may suggest you put in a gate. That would prevent unauthorized or non-residents from coming in. So considering a gate, posting signage, when you incorporate video into that, I would tell you, let's capture their license plates. I put a camera up and I'll capture all the license plates. First responders really love to have a license plate if there's an incident on the property. Say, yes, this vehicle was here. I can track them down. Here's the owner. It really gives them a great starting point. Some other examples there, is just with flow right to left. If you're having a problem with people in the parking lot after hours, the camera can tell what a person in a car is. You set a rule that says, hey, more than 3 people, cause an alert. And we'll talk about that actual workflow of how an alert is generated, where it goes, what happens to it. So just to understand that you really need to look at each incident that you have on the property and say, what am I going to do about it? And you'll have a measurable result at the end. So to the basics, we've done webinars before and we got a lot of basic questions. You may be familiar with this. We're going to go through this very briefly. There's really 3 kinds of cameras or systems out there right now. You have analog systems, you have IP or Internet Protocol systems, and a buzzword is wireless cameras. We're going to touch briefly on each of those. If you have an analog system, most likely it's 5 years or older. Some of the larger manufacturers were making, pretty top of the line at the time analog cameras. If you're buying any lower end box systems right now, they're probably coax. There are some advantages to it as very low cost and low maintenance. Certain environments, they could perform better, but it just depends on the scene. And a lot of people just choose to do this themselves, since a professional installation, can get expensive. So it just depends on your budget. The offset of that is you're going to have a lot lower quality images. You're not getting the new HD quality images that you can get with the IP. You're going to lack the analytics, and it's really no management for the 82% of you that have systems right now. If you've spent hours and hours looking for video, or really just don't know what you don't know sometimes, you'll learn to appreciate some of the new management systems once you're exposed to those. If you don't know what you have, look on the back of your recorder or the back of the camera. If you see a cable similar to this, most likely you have analog. This is a Siamese cable. What Siamese is 2 cables that are joined together to make one. It's the red-black runs power, and the coax cable below it, it runs the data. It's will have an end on it similar to what goes on the back of your TV or what's called a BNC connector. But those are the 3 cables that you'll see. The power ones may be brought off to a different power supply, but those are the cables that you'll see. For Internet Protocol, once everything went digital, they were able to use your standard computer wire. You're going to be able to get high quality images over that. You're going to be able to, the amount of data and the speed of this is so much more than the coax cable and the analog cameras. That's where you're going to get all your good quality is going to come from. With the IP, you're just going to be rule-based and software-driven. The improvements in software are improving every month. Every month someone's coming out with something new. Things are on the horizon. Manufacturers are really coming out with data, because now once you have good HD quality data, you can really kind of data mine that in certain ways. The disadvantage of getting all that is it's a higher cost for the hardware. If you have an old system and that you paid for 5 or 7 years ago, those cables will most likely need to be replaced. I will add that there are converters available in the market that you can convert that. You'll just have to weigh the 2 costs of those 2.
All right, so keeping on with the IP, when you talked about the cables and being able to bring a much higher definition video across your network, that's where the incorporation of, just like the picture to the right, for those who are familiar with IT, you've got Cat5 and Cat6 cables in that image on the right-hand portion of the page. And again, it's the advantage is that you can take those cables and you can create an environment that will be much better for you and much better for video recall. You get that higher quality image, and you also, again, it's rule-based, it's computer software driven, and you can actually carry power to the camera itself across that cable as well, because everything is distributed on pairs through this particular type of cable. The disadvantages, as we've spoken of, is the higher cost. Installation is not inexpensive, but it does definitely, the results, outweigh the cost. And it may require you to run some new cables. But as Chris said, there are devices and add-ons that can be incorporated with current cable. And I guess that's something that you do have to weigh as far as options, if you want to kind of upgrade the cable you're already using, or you would prefer to put some cable in that's going to meet today's requirements and future upgrades. This type of process of cabling and integration into your network does, and it can be very, very complex. So again, you do want to consult with vendors that can answer those kinds of questions.
And the new buzzword, I wouldn't call it a buzzword, is wireless.
Well, if you live in a neighborhood like mine, all of my neighbors seem to run out to your local Sam's and Costco, and they purchase these wireless systems. They're great to a degree, but they have their limitations. But some of the biggest advantages that people are finding are low cost, and the data cables are not required. Now, on a commercial level, there's a little more to it, because you can establish a network that these cameras will function off. But the disadvantage to wireless cameras is that they still must run power. So you still got to have a power source in order to do that. Usually used single-family homes installation. It's not a lot of commercial. The only place that I knew when I was out there doing it that we used it was in putting wireless cameras up in a port for a state on the eastern seaboard. They used because they just didn't have the methods of running cable, because a lot of their areas were paved, so they had to kind of think of it a little differently. But it was a very costly event.
Yeah, from a vendor standpoint, JB, wouldn't you agree? If I'm going to have to run a cable for power, I might as well just run an Ethernet cable and be done.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So enclosures, there's cameras everywhere. You've probably been in any store or anywhere and you've seen cameras. Just real briefly, I want you to know that there's a camera made for whatever your environment in your scene is. Probably the most common is just a dome camera. You see there on the left, or a bullet camera. Indoor, they can be boxed. There's pendant mounts. They can recess into the ceilings. They can be small and hidden. There's really almost any environment that you want. There's a camera that'll fit that. There's also some really cool cameras, what's called multi-sensors. These are similar to the domes. They're a little bigger, and they have 2, 3, 4, sometimes even 8 cameras in there that give you, a 360-degree view. These are becoming really popular because you only have to put one camera up and you can see so much more versus 4 or 5 cameras side by side to see a large area. So,
hey, Chris.
Yes, sir.
If you hold on that previous slide for a second. One of the things that I'll say about cameras and their development in common enclosures, cameras have definitely come a long ways, because I remember at one point in time, and you probably will remember, having to put heaters inside of their enclosures to keep, in colder environments, to keep the camera up and running. But the technology has advanced so much that you can actually, a lot of these cameras are just made to deal with extremely cold temperatures. For some of the members that are out there that are in colder and more northern environments, as well as those that are, in hotter environments further south, Florida, Texas, and places like that. But times have changed, and some of you may have that technology still in place, and you wonder why your cameras aren't working properly or you can't see anything during a particular temperature. And this is why, because you had to regulate as an installer the camera's temperature for operating.
Yeah, absolutely. The construction of the camera is actually a huge factor. If you think about it, you're placing this camera outside in the elements, exposed to the sun, rain, the cold and the heat. Um, I would recommend customers actually put their hands on the cameras. If you're holding it and it feels like a cheap piece of plastic, or you could break it in two, it's going to last less time out in the direct sun and the heat in the sun. So consider the quality of construction, definitely. Just want to make you aware of your two basic lens types in cameras being fixed or varifocal. The only thing that means is with a fixed, it's just a simple lens. The picture is the picture. You can't change that. You'd have to physically move the camera to manipulate the scene. With a varifocal, they have the ability to zoom in or out. Your integrator will take in consideration which camera, which lens is the best for a particular situation. We'll hit a couple other cameras. Like I said, there's a camera for every situation, and a few of the most popular outside of the dome and the bullet cameras is the new fisheye. Thermal cameras are becoming very popular, particularly in areas that are not lit at all. And the PTZ, it's just pan tilt zoom. It's a camera that can move around and zoom in at very long distances. Here's an example of a PTZ, the pan tilt zoom camera displayed. And what I would tell you about that is, well, it looks great. It has a great scene. And depending what the role of that camera is, it can be very, very beneficial to you. If you're trying to capture some detailed data at long distances, then you can do that. What I would say is, while there's some technology there for camera-to-camera communication, making the camera do certain things based on other cameras' alerts and behavior it sees, you can set this to just to do patrols. You can have it just scan an area. But as in the example right here, this is operator driven. Someone's actually physically on the system telling the camera, hey, let's move left, move right, let's zoom in and get good data. So I have customers right now that the police have access to this, and if there's a subject maybe they want to watch, or maybe as a property manager you want to investigate a particular tenant, that can be a really good tool to use. The other one that we'll talk about real briefly is the fisheye. The fisheye is really popular in retail environments. I deploy these a lot in common areas like a computer room, your lobby area, because it gives you a 360-degree view. And what's really cool about it is, as you can see right here, is you can take multiple views from the same camera and you can put them all on one screen and you can watch them simultaneously. So you can really get every kind of view, just like you were standing there, just from a single lens. And most people, when you see this on the ceiling, it just has a little bubble and they don't think they're on camera. But as you can see by this example, you have excellent video, 360 degrees. So installation, we talked about the quality of the cameras, your hardware. It's really important that you have a good vendor do a quality installation. This is JB and I were talking the other day, and some of the things that we ran into, in our years out here looking at systems. If your system hopefully doesn't look this bad, but it's pretty common to see things just tacked up, exposed wires, or just this tangled mess that you see here on the right.
If
you
you
have
leave
the right
those,
product. You can
Sorry,
have the right
I was just
product, but if it's not installed correctly, it's not going to perform to today's capabilities, and it probably won't last its full life cycle.
Yeah, and I was just going to hit on the fact that from my standpoint, both in law enforcement and doing installations, is that when you leave your wires exposed like this, they give that air of the ability to compromise. And I found even in some of the housing organizations that I've done surveys or inspections for, that these things can be compromised. You know, where wires are getting cut, getting clipped, and it takes a little bit to get them repaired. But the problem is you lose valuable information, valuable data that may help you solve a problem or perhaps help you solve something in your housing authority that may be a crime or some type of bad habit that's going on. So it's really important to protect your system, that it doesn't look like the spaghetti warehouse there on the right, and on the left, that you don't have the ability for someone to come up behind the camera and cut the wires, and you'll wonder why there's no feed.
Yeah, exactly. Here's just some really brief examples of a much cleaner, neat installation. As you can see, all the wires are in conduit, weatherproofed. These are going to last a lot longer. If you do have to have exposed wires, they need to be outdoor rated. You'll appreciate this, especially when it comes down to troubleshooting. When your vendor has to come back and try to repair something. If someone left it a mess, it's much more difficult. It will actually cost more because you're going to have to spend more time doing it. So there's some things that you can add to cameras. These cameras commonly, these are probably some of the most common accessories that you put on cameras is the IR lights here at the top. These can be either, IR or white light, and they can work just like a motion light that you have if you have a dark area, or you can supplement it with the IR to give the camera a better picture. We commonly install speakers. We'll talk about voice downs, being able to speak over via the camera and push a button and actually talk to the subjects there. And this middle one with the little hole in there, that's actually a microphone where you can collect the audio. I would say consult with your local counsel to be sure all your privacy laws are being met if you are considering putting a microphone in.
Hey, Chris, for the talking about the voice down, give the audience a little idea what you mean about when you speak of the word voice down.
Well, we'll have I have a slide a little later that has a complete walk through. But a voice down is either the operator, being you or a third party, pushing a button and actually speaking down to subjects. So if they're illegally dumping trash there on your dumpster, yell at them at the time and say dumping's not allowed, and hopefully prevent that from happening. So where's this data being stored? You have three common places you can store this data. You can store it what's called on the edge, local, or the cloud. So today's cameras, a lot of them have servers in the software recording device already inside of them. It's a one-stop shop. You can just put that camera up. It'll record to itself. You get to that camera, you can see the video. Most common is local. You have an NVR or an actual server, depending on the number of cameras there in your office or location, and all the data comes back over those Ethernet cables we talked about, and they record to that. And the new option is the cloud. You can record to the cloud. We would say you have less hardware upfront costs, but you're going to start incurring some monthly fees. The more storage you have, the more cloud space you use, the more your monthly fees are going to be. So you just have to decide whether you want that CapEx up front or you want to drag that out sometimes. Edge cameras, just to go back real briefly, usually those aren't deployed unless they're remote locations, or maybe you only have a 1 or 2 camera install where it really wouldn't justify an 8-port NVR or a larger server. So that's a method that you can get around some of that hardware cost. I commonly am asked, how much storage do I have? And there's no right answer, but we recommend at least 30 days. Um, the hard drive size kind of governs that, but it can be manipulated with the camera settings. But I don't recommend um, reducing your quality to get um, more time out of your DVR. I would say you need to increase your storage. But when I'm asked that question, JB, I'm always ask them the same thing. What's the maximum time someone could bring up an incident? So that may vary. But
Yeah,
in
it
general,
varies.
more is always less. More is always
Absolutely.
better than less. Sorry. So, so what is a VMS, a video management system? It's the software we were referring to. If you have one of these cheaper box systems, it's just what's on the screen there, how you're viewing your cameras, how you're interfacing or your GUI to that camera system. I refer to it a lot as it's the iOS or your Android, just like on your cell phone. It also interfaces with your computer, your tablet, your cell phone. All the really good ones, you're going to have a licensing fee. So that's an important question to ask your vendor when you're considering a product: is what is the licensing? Is it upfront and one time, or it could be annual? So that's something to consider in your total cost of ownership. I'm going to give you a couple really brief examples of a VMS. This is the Avigilon VMS, and you'll see what they're all pretty similar. You're going to have your camera views here, a list of cameras on the left. I can go back to recorded, and I can go back to all the settings and rules that does. If you have access cameras, you're going to run what's called Milestone, and this is, as you can see, it's really similar to the other one. Cameras are on the left. You can manipulate your camera views however you want them, and you can access all the controls. This is Genetec, a really popular one as well. Again, really similar. What we find is people get used to the way something looks, and they don't want to change from it. But what I would say, one of the things I would say is deploying the same one at an enterprise level is definitely beneficial. So you wouldn't, if you had 3 properties and you put a system at each property, you would not want to run a different system on each one. It'd be much easier cost-wise. It would be easier in training if you have turnover, and just keeping everything updated. So you know the basics here. You've reached out. Maybe you're considering replacing or upgrading your system, or you're thinking about having one. You've reached out to some integrators. So we have software tools now that help us. Again, it's not a cookie cutter situation. We after having a conversation with you to see what we need to address. One of the important parts vendors need to do is set your expectations. If you look at this chart here on the left of this guy with the license plate, everyone wants quality all the way to the left and not the quality to the right. So if that's what you say, then that's the way the system would be designed. I usually refer to this as on the far right is where a camera can detect someone. It needs about 20 pixels per foot to detect someone. In the middle here, I call that the recognize. You can recognize someone pretty well with those pixels per foot. On the far left, at 100 pixels per foot, then that's going to be identify. Forensically, you can identify that person. So here's just an example. I have a blueprint here of an apartment complex. I place a particular camera here, and I can tell you how many pixels per foot that I'm going to get out of that camera. And I've input a lot of data on the height, the angle, the target, and some other things to achieve this number. But at the far end, I can tell you confidently that you're going to get 75 pixels per foot. So we'd be over here in this quality range with a camera placed there on the side of that building. So that's a really good way to set a customer's expectation. It kind of avoids guessing too. And before you write a check, you want to kind of know what you're getting.
Absolutely.
Here's this is just another software tool. This one's really pretty cool. It does really the same thing, similar. But what I do like about this particular one, if it's on Google Earth, then it can actually pull up a picture from Google Earth and at the pixel per foot and give you an example of what it would look like. Right here on the bottom right would be if it was zoomed in at the farthest level. This is what you could kind of expect. So again, this is a really good way to set the customer's expectation. If I would encourage you to get some sort of report or have these kind of questions answered before you make a decision. So we kind of talked about analytics and AI. What is that? So today's cameras, they're going towards object detection. They are really good at detecting what a person is, what a car is, or a vehicle. It's moving towards almost every object, and as that expands, our capabilities are going to become even more. But what this allows us to do is we can identify people and vehicles now. We can search off of those. It can actually track faces, clothing, or other items. And that allows us to search across your whole site, all your cameras, for a particular person or vehicle. The cameras also learn what behavior is normal in a scene. For example, if a parking lot and cars come in, they park, and people walk back and forth. That seems pretty normal. If a car starts circling the parking lot over and over and over, the camera is smart enough to say that's unusual, and you can make that generate an alert, and you can react to it. Here's a really brief example of the appearance search from a Vigilon in action. So, like I was saying, the camera is now going to say, hey, I know this is a car, but it's going to see distinguishing features about that car as well. So I have a subject car here. I'm just going to right-click this and say, find the appearances of that vehicle. And it's going to search all the cameras and all the data from the time frame that you specified, and it comes up with a bunch of thumbnails here on the left. From those thumbnails, I'm going to tell the camera, yes, that's the car I'm looking for, or no, it's not. And it starts to build a timeline. As you can see, it puts a little star there along the timeline over different cameras, and it's really creating a storyboard for you. So as your subject left one camera and it starts appearing on the right, now you don't have to try to switch cameras and watch 15, 20 minutes of view. This is really putting it together really quickly for you, so you can see the whole incident in real time. This is also used in left bags or missing child kind of thing. You see, in just a very brief 2 minutes, we were able to almost see the whole scene of how that vehicle entered, what it did, and how it left the property.
Okay. Additional options. Enhanced access control systems that integrate with your video security allows one platform and ability to search door open, close records with corresponding video. So this helps, in a lot of instances, and you've got intercoms that can be integrated with your system. Point of sale interface, and I know that many of the folks on this call may not have a lot of point of sale environments, if any, but even at points where you're collecting perhaps rents or some other type of transaction that may need to be made on your site or some particular site, you can integrate these things. And the great feature that I've always liked is just the presence detector. These things will detect just the presence of individuals, or like Chris says, how it's set up to detect whatever it is. If it's set up to detect dogs, vehicles, people, those parameters can be set within the system.
Yeah, I agree with you, JB. The presence detector is a great tool as well. It's great for a place that you cannot put a camera. Um, for example, a bathroom. You're going to want to put a security camera in the bathroom, but the customer, you may have a need to know if someone is in the bathroom or not. I've had customers where homeless people may come in and sleep under the stairs. That's a good place to have it, or even camp out in the bathroom or laundry room. Um, and you want to be aware of that kind of behavior. So in the beginning, we talked about the old way and the new way. So, well, what's active versus passive surveillance? Active is real-time alerts going to a real person viewing the camera, whether that person is you, your vendor, a third-party monitoring company. Passive just being, hey, we're just going to look at footage after the fact. Something happened yesterday, something known happened, a vehicle was broken into. We don't know when, and we're going to go back and look for that. So we're processing how to archive that. Could be a big benefit for you. And that slide that I was referring to, JB, earlier, this is it. This kind of shows the workflow. Here we have the HD camera using analytics, and it creates an alert, whatever that is. Maybe it's a person after midnight, person in the parking lot, a vehicle where it's not supposed to be. Whatever that case is, it generates this alert and it goes somewhere. Third-party monitoring company, alarm companies do this a lot. There's a lot of companies that do this. It actually pops up on their screen. So you have a virtual security guard on your property. They look at that. They're going to follow the protocols that have been worked out. You've given them instructions, or your vendor has, on how to react. Do you want to call the police? Do you want to voice down? What do you want us to say? Do you want the property manager called? So whatever those protocols are that you would like would happen, and it's real time. So you have a real time response. So if there's an incident on the property, the police can be immediately called, and then you can be notified. The worst thing that can happen is you find out something happened at one of your properties. You find about it on the 6 o'clock news the next morning. You want to know. You want to know in real time. So I love talking about video surveillance. This is as a vendor, as Resolute's a vendor. This is some of the things we do, and I would encourage you to look at your vendor and ask them, all the features and services that they provide. So since these are IP networks, essentially, you may have an in-house IT guy doing things, or you may you might have farmed that out. I don't know, but all your devices need to be monitored real time. So if a camera goes down, you're losing valuable data. Your network's at risk. So that needs to be monitored. And since these are IP devices, the software and firmware updates need to be required. They're constantly improving the software. So to get those features, these devices need to be updated. You need to control and monitor your assets. Spot checking for safety concerns, or these virtual patrols that we talked about, someone accessing the camera and looking at them at particular times. Maybe you have the busiest time of the day when your children in the neighborhood are getting on and off the bus. Is a great time to have a virtual patrol and have someone looking at the cameras at that time. So we also provide a customer web portal where you can look at all your sites over the area. You can monitor any issues that are going on, see your purchase order history, your historical reports, or any kind of network issues that may be there. So ask those kind of questions to see what else you get.
And Chris, one thing that I would say is to make sure that as you go through the process with your vendor, no matter who you use, make sure that your IT department is included, but understand that they must understand what their role is. They're more of a supportive role than a directive role, because as you integrate this technology, and I know as I was doing it, some of the problems that I ran into is people understanding what their role was, especially from IT. Some people wanted to make sure they had a little more control than the actual vendor as far as what to do and telling them how to do their job. But the reality is the folks that are installing this technology are the experts, but they do need certain permissions and certain access through your network. So your IT professionals do have to be included at many points in the process of going from procurement to installation.
Yeah, that's a great point.
All right, so we got a polling question up. How does your surveillance system help avoid risk issues? Well, if our audience can just take an opportunity, a short moment here, go ahead and click on your answer so we can see where everybody is. Another couple seconds here. Okay. Oh, wow. Let's see here. Wow, risky behavior alerts local property manager. We got 6% there. Risky behavior alerts police. We got 0 there. Risky behavior alerts property manager and police. We got about 11%. And risky behavior is recorded for follow-up investigation. 83% of our audience answered there.
So it sounds the majority, we had 82 have it, and 83 of those are doing it the old way. So it's hopefully hitting the nail on the head on some of the way the technology can be used, so you don't go back and look. And I always tell people you don't know what you don't know. A lot of times, using some of these powerful search tools, you can find things that you weren't aware of, because if someone doesn't report an incident, you might not know to go back and look. So thank you for your input. What we like to do is, instead of that, what we encourage and teach is try to do some real-time management, 24/7, 365. These cameras can be alerting people as actions occur. What that does, it doesn't take up your internal staff time, looking for things. It's going to distribute the capabilities. It will have, job sharing, multiple levels of interaction, and you can access these cameras from your desktop, tablet, mobile phone.
Yeah, a lot of the organizations I know that are on this call, some of them individually have designated security managers. So getting involved in a process like this can be easy for some and maybe difficult for some others. But every organization should have some form of security management in place in order to deal with this kind of thing, because it is invaluable. And I think that just not going off too far, that having these types of analytics available definitely save the money for the agency in being able to deal with some of those issues that do cost them money.
Yeah, that's a great point, and it's probably unfortunately it usually does come down to budget. So how do you measure that return on your investment? Yeah, I mean, it can reduce crime and property damage because it's stopping things from happening at that time. You'd be surprised if you stop things from happening at the time, they start to occur less and less. I have properties that pay an enormous amount of money for illegal dumping. They're popular. People go and dump there. They don't get in trouble. It gets around. They keep coming back. You prevent that from happening. You stop that from happening. Then you can save a lot of money. Usable footage for eviction process. Lots of times I'll ask the property manager, who's your top 5? And unfortunately, there's usually a small handful of tenants that are causing the majority of the problem. These cameras may capture footage that you can use in court to aid in the eviction process, if that's what you so desire.
Hey,
Really
Chris,
importantly, yeah.
I want to interrupt you back on that usable, just related to a most recent event that I dealt with doing an evaluation, security evaluation for one of our members. I remember going out on the property early during the day. Um, Things were okay, but when night fell, I went back out to do my nighttime survey, and it was like taking a small locality in a very rural environment and turning it into a casino. The amount of activity that was experienced, I had a vehicle that almost struck my vehicle, running up and down the sidewalk, kids hanging out of the sunroof, kids running across the playground, jumping on the car as it motored across the sidewalk in grassy areas. And it was a lot of things that were just out of control. And again, having that documentation for things that you weren't able to see or that you didn't know went on after hours definitely aids in saying that, hey, we've got tenants that are producing an unsafe environment and also an uninviting environment for visitors at night. And you're able to put that in play to handle and help with the eviction process. And I think that is just so vital when property owners can't be around 24/7.
Yeah, so a lot of those incidents do happen when you're not around. Or, property managers are probably the most busy people I've ever encountered. And you really can't just stop what you're doing all the time and go address something simple as, the person that's always parking in front of the fire hydrant. That's why you can leverage that technology to do it, to stop that behavior, but more importantly, have that information pushed to the organization at all levels, instead of you trying to pull that information. And a good example is when that alert is generated, one of the things that we do at Resolute is we create a formal report. And that's emailed to the property manager or maybe regional manager. It could even go even higher depending on what it is. But instead of going back and looking at footage to say how many times did they park in front of the fire hydrant, you would get a report that says vehicle in front of the fire hydrant. The property manager can collect those, find out who it is. She may recognize them, and then go address it when they can. So the regional and corporate oversight all the way down to a property level, a lot of people find very appealing. We also want to make you aware that there's some various pricing models out there. Like we said, a lot of times these things come down just simple to budget. So you have your hardware purchase, and you also need to consider, the monthly support that's required to keep these things up and running. There are leasing options available, and a lot of people like that idea because it can defer the capex for the term of the contract. And there's what's called VSaaS. You've probably heard the term as a service. It's just video surveillance as a service. What that is we're going to give you the product. We'll design it, engineer it, install it, and support it for the complete term of the contract, and you just pay a fixed monthly fee. So unpredicted costs are avoided, which is a lot of times very, very pleasing for people. So just be aware that there's more than one way to purchase one of these systems. All right, a little outside of the scope of video, but just want to make you aware of IoT. Another thing you probably heard about. You probably have it in your home, but it's the Internet of Things. It's really it's anything, any device that can be connected to the network. And we are talking with customers right now on what that means. There are already smart cities. You just go Google smart home, you're going to see a list of products that are available to you. It could be anything from your garage door opener to your refrigerator, but your thermostat. These are just Internet of Things and devices, and there are enterprise level devices that are being leveraged, and it's going to keep moving that direction. with a good RF network or a good Wi-Fi network is probably a term everyone understands. Those things can be connected and then managed. One of the great examples I like to use is the smoke detectors. If you had your a wireless smoke detector in every apartment that you had, you could sit at your desk and you could see the status of those. The reason I like that example, JB, is because like HUD inspections, they check the smoke detectors, and a lot of times the maintenance guy just put batteries in those the day before, leading up to that inspection, and sure enough, there'll be a couple that the batteries have been removed. So if it was wireless and you had a management there at your desk, you would be able to know exactly when that went offline. And
that definitely helps.
There's a lot of cameras being hacked too. So internet security, cybersecurity is just as important. Any device on the network, I think a hacker would tell you the easiest way into a network is the simplest device. So consider security as well. So our takeaways are, before you buy, I tell people you have two choices. You have to choose a product, and you need to choose a vendor. So your vendor should be able to tell you, on manufacturers, you can do your own due diligence, but with their experience, will be able to tell you the quality of the product and ease of support. Support from the manufacturer is extremely important from a vendor's aspect because I have to deal with them all the time. And how hard is it for me to RMA a camera if it broke? How's their warranty? How's their tech support if we run into something? So that's very important. Just like anything else, do your due diligence on your vendor. Get a quality inspection. How do they support it after they install it? What other maintenance costs? And if I have an incident, are they going to respond to it? Be sure that you cover all the coverage areas. You look at your property, what do you want covered? And go back to that slide that I showed you with the 100 pixels per foot versus the 20. Be sure that you understand the quality that you're going to get. So you want to compare apples to apples and know exactly what you're getting. We hit on property power. All these devices take power. One of the costly things that can be in your network is property power. If you don't have that available, you may have to put new meters in. So if you have that using exterior lights or something on buildings, you're at an advantage. Consider aesthetics. Do you mind exterior conduit on the side of the buildings, etc.? And you want to be sure this is designed, to be reliable, but you want to be able to expand. So we'll leave you with your safe and secure environments closer than ever. These cameras today, high quality, great clarity on these. Using event-based rules, location rules, you can really start changing the behavior on a property. Having your staff informed, having the police immediately called, having all levels of your organization be able to access this and see that when they want it. And you can access it from any smart device. So it's really convenient and works really well with whatever your organization's structure is. Here's our contact information. Again, if you weren't able to write it down at the on the first slide. Again, this session was recorded. If you want to go back, or if you know someone that was not able to attend, both JB and myself are very thankful everyone attended, and we're available to answer any questions offline, or have one-on-one conversations with your organizations. JB?
Well, I just want to say thank you from my end. If we have any additional questions other than the ones that we've already responded to, we will post those in our follow-up communication with all those who've attended today. Other than that, I'd like to thank our audience for their participation And again, we'll recontact you with the links for this particular session that was recorded. And everyone have a great afternoon.
Thank you, JB. Thank you,
You're
everyone.
welcome.